Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silangan.
Good evening. This is Hazel Benigno for Balitang Pilipinas. Tonight, we discuss the creation of cultural minorities in the Philippines. We now go to Maria Teresa Santa Elena Santiago de los Reyes as she analyzes William Henry Scott's The Creation of a Cultural Minority. Thank you, Hazel. Okay, so Scott is trying to prove that the Spanish colonization created cultural minorities in the Philippines. And he does this with examples from the Isneg tribe of Apayao. Let us look at where Scott is looking at. We go here. The Isneg tribe of the Kalinga Apayao province, the mountains of far northern Luzon. First, Scott says that the Spaniards were able to exploit already existing factions between the different tribes when they first arrived. They were able to divide and conquer their missionary work more easily because of the warring tribes, driving the already existing factions between them further. Now, the same divisions exist between mainstream Filipinos and tribal Filipinos because, like the Spanish who were suspicious of the tribal Filipinos who resisted their colonization, the mainstream Filipinos have adopted the same ways of thinking. Now, you mentioned that the mainstream Filipinos have adopted the same ways of thinking. Please explain this. Well, Scott is saying how Spanish thought influenced what came to be mainstream Filipino thought. The Isnegs were a stereotypical picture of an ethnic minority because they held on to their tribal traditions. The Filipinos were so colonized into a Spanish mentality that they started to disdain being associated with the tribal Pinoys, even though they once acted the same way. It did not help that the Spanish called those who allowed themselves to be colonized dociles, while those who resisted were feroces. Also, another point Scott makes is that the tribes who did not conform to Spanish thought turned into minorities because they were almost, in a sense, ostracized. There began to be a line between Filipinos who submitted to Spanish rule and those who did not. Those who did submit were in the Spaniards' favor. Even the government acted against the minority, regardless of who was at fault in an argument or kung ano whatevers. Many Filipinos became acculturated, creating scorn for the minority. The Spanish resented the Isnegs and other tribes for not submitting to their ideas, because the Spaniards wanted to mold all the Filipinos into their image. Well, now that we see the division between the mainstream and the tribal Filipinos, who does Scott say are the true Filipinos? Although they are the minority, tribal Pinoys are considered to be more Filipino because they stuck to their cultural roots. They held on to their culture and customs and kung ano man. And so they eventually started to look less like other tribes who were acculturating and conforming to the Spanish ways. Unfortunately, those who changed most became our current idea of what is truly Filipino, but those who changed the least were actually denied the title of being called Filipino. So basically, what is Scott trying to say? He is basically saying that before the Spanish colonization, all the tribes were considered Filipinos. Afterwards, the true Filipinos should be those who retain their roots after all the Spanish influence, but ironically enough, those who conformed, or those that constitute the majority, are considered Filipinos, while the Isnegs and other tribes are referred to as cultural minorities. Well, if you ask me, I personally agree that the Spanish arrival was the catalyst for the creation of cultural minorities in the Philippines. After all, without their colonization, the Filipinos would have all remained the same as they were originally. The Spanish brought ways that were only adopted by some, and the majority always wins, as in this case, in which those who chose to give up their true culture are now regarded as true Filipinos. But that's just one reporter's opinion. For Balitang Pilipinas, this is Hazel Benigno. Have a good night.
Alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay.